Section 22 of Reclaiming Revolution. History, Summation, and Lessons from the Work of STORM, Standing Together to Organize a Revolutionary Movement. This recording is in the public domain. Recorded by the Progressing America Project. Reclaiming Revolution, Section 22. Revolutionary Feminism. Experiences. STORM centered much of our political analysis on the concept of keeping sisters at the center of the struggle, a slogan that STORM developed early in our history to express our commitment to keeping women of color and working class women at the center of our analysis, program, and practice. We were critical of white feminisms that marginalize and erase the experiences of women of color. We were also critical of other parts of the left, whether communist, nationalist, or neither, that under-prioritized the issues of women of color and working class women. This position, while also found in many women of color feminist circles, is alarmingly under-prioritized by the rest of the left. We advanced this sisters at the center line through explicit propaganda pieces, through our style of work, and through theoretical study. STORM's commitment to keeping sisters at the center of our work manifested in many ways. Our membership quotas ensured that our membership had more women than men, and more people of color than white people. The quotas also ensured that women of color would be a plurality of the membership. This created an organizational climate different from most of the rest of the left, which was whiter and more male. STORM's climate was more welcoming to many women of color. STORM had many strong women of color leaders, who played a very public role in the broader movement. Their example as militant, articulate, and politically developed leaders served as an inspiration for many young women of color. These leaders disproved many people's perception that women of color couldn't play such roles. And STORM members were expected to, and for the most part did, prioritize developing the leadership of women of color in our mass work. On the theoretical front, STORM prioritized studies of revolutionary feminism. We organized both internal education and public study series on questions of revolutionary feminism. We worked to push our politics past the sexist assumptions of much of the Marxist world, for example, that feminism is inherently bourgeoisie, and that all other liberation struggles should be subordinated to the fight against capitalism. We also studied the role of women in Third World liberation movements. We found a rich history and a vision that united struggles against capitalism, colonialism, and women's oppression. At a time when transgender liberation and its relationship to revolutionary feminism were woefully neglected topics in the movement at large, STORM worked to integrate these analyses into our line and practice. One member in particular, who was also a member of Transaction, led this work. It was an emotional topic for many of us. Sexism and transgender oppression had deeply wounded many of our members. On top of that, we entered the conversation with the misconception that feminism and trans liberation were somehow pitted against each other. We struggled over how to challenge the gender binary system without erasing the reality of oppression that women face under patriarchy. Through this process, we learned to better differentiate between biological sex and socialized gender roles. We finally came to the conclusion that the gender binary system is a central component of patriarchy, which forces everyone into the narrow social roles of, quote, man and woman, end quote. Put another way, patriarchy oppresses both biological females who live their lives as women and people who live outside of the narrow gender roles that patriarchy prescribes. We also made errors in our attempts to apply revolutionary feminism, most of which played out in members' individual practice. Many members did not consistently apply a feminist practice in their work or their personal lives. And the group did not deal well with feminist critique within the organization. STORM, and in particular our leadership, reacted poorly to such critiques because they felt reminiscent of the flawed feminist allegations that had triggered the group's first major crisis. These conversations would often get shut down quickly without adequate discussion of their validity. These critiques would then be labeled gender essentialism, invalid critiques of men based on a flawed assumption that all men are inherently domineering. And these critiques, usually of men of color, would often be equated with racist feminism. And even with our political critique of patriarchy and sexism, we had no way to intervene when members engaged in sexist behavior in their personal lives. This contributed to an organizational culture where it was difficult to explore questions around feminist practice. Some members feared the likelihood of intense and emotional struggle if they raised feminist critiques. They worried that they would be targeted as divisive or as attacking leadership. Within the organization, we failed to place sufficient priority on, or invest adequate organizational resources in, the theoretical development of women of color in the group as revolutionaries. In particular, the women of color in STORM's core did not receive the mentorship or support that they needed to reach their potential as Marxist thinkers. As a result, men and white people were our most developed theoreticians, reflecting and replicating the oppressive dynamics of the educational system. Finally, while we believed that fighting women's oppression must be central to revolutionary work, most of our actual mass work focused almost exclusively on issues of race and class. While we worked to develop women of color as leaders and to fight sexism within the movement, our work rarely challenged patriarchy in society as a whole. Lessons. A truly liberatory revolutionary feminism must be based not only on an analysis of women's oppression, but also on deep analysis of white supremacy, capitalism, imperialism, heterosexism, and transgender oppression. We have to challenge the sexism embedded in most of the Marxist world, as well as the racism, classism, and reformism of mainstream white feminism. It is important to uphold a feminist analysis at all levels of our work. In doing so, we must actively challenge the tendency to uphold feminism in word while undermining it in practice. Even when we are trying hard to promote feminist analyses and practices, it is easy for a gap to exist between our intentions and our practice. Allowing either obvious or subtle sexist and patriarchal gender dynamics in an organization to go unchallenged is a critical error. We need to open space for explicit conversations about the dynamics of sexism and feminism in our organizations, in our work, and in our lives. And we need to understand that challenging sexist behavior supports the development of revolutionaries of all genders. To truly uphold revolutionary feminism, an organization should incorporate a genuinely feminist practice. It should support and develop the leadership of women, especially women of color and working class women. And it should engage in mass work that challenges the oppression of women, particularly women of color and working class women, in society at large. End of section 22.